Hey guys, welcome to Herding Little Cows to the Glory of God. Today's video is brought to you by this book. It's a Heroes of the Faith, David Livingstone by Sam Wellman. I don't know if you can see that. I'm trying to read it off the back. And if you don't know who David Livingstone is, he was a missionary who went to Africa and did some great things while he was there. The problem is a lot of times we will look up so much to somebody who was a missionary and did things that we aren't willing to say that some things that they did in their life were wrong or bad. I mean, of course we'll say, oh yes, that sinful man before he was saved, yes, he did wrong things. But what I mean is things that he did while he was being a missionary. So Samuel is currently reading this book. I still think there's benefit to reading this book, even though I do not approve of this one part. And I just wanted to share today because it's been something that I've been thinking about since he showed it to me this morning. So, and we've had older girls who have read this book and they didn't tell this part to me. It's not that big of a deal because the kids know what we believe about children and being a blessing. So it's not, my kids know to bring something to me if it's something that we haven't discussed or something that they think that we're teaching that is going to taint somebody's view, one of our other kids or anything. Samuel just brought it to me this morning. So it says, so we're going to back up. David Livingstone is deciding that he's going to go to Kolobeng. I don't know if I'm saying that right. But he's going to go there, and it's not a place where he wants to bring his women and his wife and children. And so he's saying that Mary, the wife, and the kids are going to have to go live in Scotland. And I think that a lot of missionary organizations used to do this, where they would say, you go, like the missionary, go off into the field and leave your wife and kids away. Or take your wife with you and leave your kids in boarding school. And God tells us to be the ones to train and teach our children. And so that would be a whole nother video, but leaving your kid in the care of other people for years on end so you can go off and do missionary work means that you're leaving the biggest mission field that God has given you, your own family, your own children, to go witness to other people. And I know for a fact, I know some Christians who have gone out and done the work of a missionary and are very good about telling people on the streets or telling people in other countries about who God is, who Jesus is, and that is a great thing, but they neglect to tell their own children. And I'm not saying that just because you tell your children they're going to be saved, that's not what I'm saying, but if you're not doing it in your home, you have no right doing it to the world out there, because God has given the people within your home to you specifically. The people out in the world, we're all supposed to go minister to them. The people in your home, God has given you specifically as your mission field. So we sometimes forget that. But here's the part in the book. It's on page 107 if you have this book. It says, Mary didn't have to reveal all her thoughts to David, her thoughts about going to Scotland without him. By now, he knew what she was thinking. She had lived 6 active years with him. She had 4 healthy children. She and David would resume their life after he had explored a while. And like every young married woman of her day, she knew togetherness meant constant pregnancies followed by ever-increasing toil. Being separated had its blessings too. David knew she was thinking of that as well. So there are so many problems with the paragraph right here, so I'm not going to get into all of it. But first, I'm glad that they were blessed with 4 healthy children. That is great. And she's been living with him for 6 years, doing active ministry alongside him. Wonderful. That is all good. None of that part is bad. And she and David would resume their life together after he had explored a while. So they're planning on getting back together. This is great. And like every young married woman of her day. Okay, first, stop right there. They're saying that at this time that this, I'm not sure when David Livingstone was around. Let me see if I can find out. David Livingstone was born, maybe not born. He was a young man in 1826. So this is the early 1800s, mid 1800s. They're saying that every woman at this time knew that if she was with her husband, it meant constant pregnancies. So right there, this book, you kind of have to think about this, and I think we skim over things a lot. But this book is saying that women at that time didn't know the beauty of birth control, that they could have made a change to this, that this togetherness didn't necessarily mean you had to be pregnant all the time. God doesn't tell us to use birth control. God tells us that children always are a blessing, and God is the one who creates that baby. There is no baby created that God isn't part of. You don't just have sex and a baby results. I can tell you that my husband and I have been intimate more times than we have children. So right there. I can also tell you that not every pregnancy results in a healthy live baby at the end. We have lost 2 babies to miscarriage and 1 baby to being a stillbirth. So just the act doesn't mean that you will get pregnant. God has to decide that you and your husband, or you and whoever you were with, are going to have a baby. But God's the one who creates that life. It doesn't just happen on its own. God has made a mechanism to create that being of a sperm and an egg, but it is not, it doesn't mean that every time a sperm and an egg are present in the same place that you're going to have a baby. It takes God in that. So this book is telling you that they believe birth control is a good idea because women in her day knew that being together meant constant pregnancy. We are the enlightened ones. We know that there are ways to make it so you don't have to have a baby. That's against what God says. Babies are a blessing. God will give you babies when he chooses to. And we have seen that God has given us a baby, that we have found out that we are pregnant at a time that may not look like the greatest time to have a baby. But you know what? It's God's perfect timing. And Mary probably didn't think it was a great time for her to have a baby. And God had Jesus through that. There's lots of people in history you can look at that had a baby and people thought they should have aborted. People thought they shouldn't have gotten pregnant in the first place. Whatever it is, that baby is still a blessing from God. And I personally have babies who are part of my life that were conceived in sin. We all have a sinful nature, but I'm saying like the act the parents were doing, they either weren't married, it was a rape, whatever the case may be. The baby was conceived through a sinful act, but that baby is still a blessing and was still created by God in that act. So no baby is a surprise to God. No baby is ever accidentally in a mother's womb. So God's planned all the pregnancies. So it says, and like every young married woman of her day, she knew togetherness meant constant pregnancies followed by ever-increasing toil. Being together does not mean constant pregnancies. Like I said, God is the one who puts every baby in your womb. And I know a lot of people who deal with, I think it's called secondary infertility, where they have a baby and have no problem. Like immediately, upon their honeymoon, get pregnant, have a baby, everything's great. And then they struggle for years to have a child. I think that we suppose on God that we are going to continue whatever state we're in for the rest of our lives. So I know some people who have had children very, very close in age, and it's tough. It's tough changing all those diapers. I'm not saying that that's not a tough spot to be in life. But to presume that you're going to have a baby every year is presuming on God, because God is the one who's going to decide when those babies are going to come into your life. And maybe for some reason, God has you have 10 babies in 10 years, and that's great. That's what God's planned for your family. Maybe God's going to have you have 2, and then you're going to have years where you're not going to have any more. We have decided that we need to take matters into our own hands because we don't feel like God's timing is right, or that God is going to put us in this state of being a problem. If God's providing for the children, if God's providing those blessings, he's going to provide the finances. He's going to provide the housing. He's going to provide all of that. God has all the resources. God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and we don't trust him to have enough food to feed our next child, that he's the one that created it in our womb. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. If something happened, Mark and I are not stopping children. If God were to choose to bless us again right now, that's great. But if something happened and I was taken advantage of by another man, we would still raise that baby to the glory of God, because God creates that blessing. If God were to drop a baby on our doorstep, we would raise that baby to the glory of God, because God has provided that blessing. And if he's going to provide you with that, he's also going to provide means to take care of that baby. So this state of presuming on God that he's going to keep us in a state that's going to cause us problems. And that's what I'm going to go on to with the next part. It says, she knew togetherness meant constant pregnancies followed by ever increasing toil. You can take that two ways. More children means more work. There's more dishes to do. There's more laundry to do. All of that is more work. But there's also more hands to do the work. There's also more love in the house. There's also more blessings. It's not, I don't know. I can read this and think about how hard life would be if you just kept having children year after year after year. Or you can think of what blessings God has given you, what he's teaching you through those blessings, and how he's trying to grow your family to be more like him. That's what we as Christians are supposed to be doing, is we're supposed to be being conformed more into the image of Christ. And we're supposed to be using every opportunity that God gives us to glorify him and enjoy him forever. And we do that through having children, if God blesses us with them. I'm not saying that God is only happy with those who have 100 children. That's not what I'm saying. God is not more happy with the Duggars than he is with some family that didn't have children. Children are a blessing. God gives other blessings also. So I'm not saying you have to go to any means possible to have as many children as possible. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm also saying God says not to withhold, like, you don't want to withhold those blessings God's trying to give you. No, God, please don't. I don't want any more blessings. I have enough gold right now. Please don't hand me any more gold. You know, it'd be difficult. I'd have to find another place to put it. It's really heavy. Someone might, try to take advantage of me because I have more gold. You wouldn't hear anybody say that about any type of wealth, about any type of job promotion, anything like that. But we say it about children. And God has said that children are a blessing. And we have decided as a culture that children aren't. That we can just decide when to dispose of them, when to not accept them from God. And I've heard people say, well, we use birth control, but if God wanted me to get pregnant, he'd let me get pregnant. He's still sovereign over that. Well, if God's sovereign over that, why aren't you accepting that when God makes the baby in the first place? Because you're not going to get pregnant if God doesn't want you to get pregnant. It just doesn't easily happen. If you've ever seen the intricacies of an egg and sperm joining, it's not just that they happen to be in the same space at the same time. There have to be other things going on. And so we just need to trust God. Trust God in everything. And I find that people will say they trust God and they will just throw him out in the issue of children. There is a time in the Bible where it talks about a husband and wife agreeing to not come together for a time of fasting and prayer. And I could see that if you have some medical condition going on. I'm not going to get into all the intricacies of when that would be an acceptable practice, but it also says that that's not to be a long-term thing and you're not to withhold intimacy from your spouse. So that is like a different video, but I'm just saying in general, wives and husbands coming together, birth control is saying to God, God, please stop blessing me. I'm done with your blessings. I don't want to see what you're trying to work for good through these blessings. I don't want to see how you're going to conform me more to the image of Christ through these blessings. I don't want struggle. I want life to be easy. I want life to be like what it is. I don't want to invite more hardships into my life, but God uses those things to make us more like him. He uses those things to make us understand other people. He makes us go through these things so that we can be part of the body of Christ like he wants us to be. He's trying to mold us into, maybe you're that big toe. Maybe you're that knee. Maybe you're that forearm. I don't know what part of the body of Christ you are, but God's using all of these things to strengthen his body. and he uses children to help sanctify us in our families. So, I don't know. I just needed to say that after seeing that in the book today. I know it's something that I've talked with other people about. And so if you enjoyed this video and think someone else would be blessed by just hearing, hopefully a biblical idea of what children are, the biblical blessing that they are, please share this video with other people. But I thank you for joining us on Herding Little Cows to the Glory of God. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.